What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another Retro Yu-Gi-Oh video, and this is going to be another discussion video, but it's going to be a bit different from my normal discussion videos. So, normally in these discussion videos, I broach a topic that, maybe has a couple different perspectives, and, we just start like a sort of conversation about it or a debate about it, and we just sort of get people talking about that sort of thing. And, this this will probably get people talking, but it's a bit of a different sort of discussion as there kind of does need to be an official stance on this sort of issue. And so I'll be saying my official stance on this at the end of the video, and that'll be the official stance that my Discord server uses for sort of like tournament play. But basically, what I'm talking about is cards that basically force you to discard, but then sort of maybe provide verification or not. And I didn't really word that the best, but let me just talk through the cards that I'm talking about, and maybe you'll understand what I mean. So in my last video, I played a Gravekeepers deck, and Gravekeepers play a card known as Royal Tribute. Royal Tribute's a spell card that says if you control Necro Valley, both players discard any monsters in their hands. Now, you'll notice that this effect doesn't actually say and then, show the opponent the rest of their hand to verify that they had just sent the monsters from their hand. And, this actually, like, in real life, like paper play, this could potentially cause a problem in tournaments because if you are playing against someone and they discard some monsters from their hand, but they accidentally, or not accidentally, but they keep a monster in their hand, and you don't get to verify that that monster actually, is in their hand or not, then potentially they could cheat and they could potentially win a game through cheating. Now, in online play, it's a little bit different for us as there are other ways to sort of counteract this cheating. So there have been rulings, issued in the past about things like Royal Tribute, and most specifically Mind Crush, as Mind Crush was the card that had the most like sort of meta relevance throughout the game's history that sort of did this thing. Mind Crush is a trap that I haven't actually covered in my videos up to this point because it comes out a bit later in Soul of the Duelist, but it says declare one card name. If that card is in your opponent's hand, they must discard all copies of it. Otherwise, you discard one random card. And this is a card that, as I mentioned, it's had a number of different rulings over the years as to how exactly you resolve this card. Because, if you manage to activate this card, call a card from your opponent's hand, and they actually have that card in their hand, but they say, no, I don't have that card in my hand, then, you'd have to discard a card, and potentially you'd wind up in this, like, irrevocable game state where, your opponent just cheated, and, if they draw cards later in the game, and then they play that card later, if they've been shuffling up their hand, you might not be able to tell whether they had it or not, etc. So there have been a sort of different feelings on this card in the past in terms of paper play, and there's actually a very good and very thorough sort of breakdown on the rulings of Mind Crush that was put on the goatformat.com website. And it just goes through like the rulings history of Mind Crush and goatformat.com's like specific stance on this. And it's very interesting to see, so I highly recommend you read it. It goes through this sort of thing a lot better than I would. But I think it's a very good read for people who are like interested in this sort of thing, which if you're still watching the video, hopefully you are interested in this sort of thing. Now, an important thing to note at the end of this article, it says, we do not reach the question of the extrapolation of these rulings to any other cards besides Mind Crush. So, at the time of when this article was made, this wouldn't necessarily apply to things like Royal Tribute. Since then, I've seen some GOAT rulings about Royal Tribute where they basically say, it works the same way that Mind Crush does, and you don't reveal the hand afterwards in online play. So, I'm not sure if that's like a universal thing about Royal Tribute in GOAT format. So definitely let me know down in the comments below. I've just seen some people say that it would work that way, and that might not be the way it works. But I think it does make some amount of sense with these cards because the thing about these cards is that they don't say like, and then reveal the hand, right? And generally in Yu-Gi-Oh, when cards don't actually say to reveal a certain thing, like a certain private information, you generally don't necessarily want to give them that extra power, as that can make them a bit more broken than the designers potentially intended. Now, as a note, this doesn't apply to something like Trap Dust Shoot. Trap Dust Shoot explicitly says, reveal the hand, right, and look at it. So this only applies to cards that, maybe say like discard a certain card from the hand or do something to certain cards in hand, but then don't actually say reveal those cards in hand. And unlike in paper play, in online play, we actually have ways to sort of verify whether your opponent actually complied with these cards after the fact. And that's in the form of dueling book replays. And in the tournaments that we actually hold on the Discord server, in terms of like actually competitive tournaments, we don't necessarily do this in the locals, but we, maybe could in the future. But the locals are a lot more casual, so they aren't really held to the same level of scrutiny. But in the big monthly tournaments, we actually do require people to post the replays of the matches afterwards. And so if you do cheat around something like a royal tribute in those matches, people will be able to see that, and that will be marked as cheating. And of course, there are some like extenuating circumstances occasionally, but if you do activate a royal tribute, or like if your opponent activates royal tribute and you don't actually discard cards from hand that you should discard, then that is like, there's very little to say that that's like a brain fart or something. That's just like actively cheating, probably in most cases. So that will potentially require an investigation in that, and that could potentially get you disqualified from the tournament. So there actually are ways around this, whereas in paper play, like, you didn't really have that option, right? If the moment passed, you wouldn't necessarily be able to revisit that. So it's a bit iffier there. But I think in online play, I think it does make sense that, you wouldn't necessarily have to reveal the hand off of Royal Tribute after it's been activated. And this is like the opposite that I played in the game that I played with Gravekeepers, and that sort of sparked this discussion because people were saying, oh, you shouldn't have seen the opponent's hand after that. And, after looking through all the discussion on that happened in my Discord, link to that in the description down below if you do want to join that, and then you can check out that discussion that happened in the ruling section of the Discord. But based on that discussion, I sort of see what people say about, why you'd potentially verify or not verify in the case of these cards. And this isn't really something that came up in past formats. There was actually like one potentially major example where it would potentially come up, which is like Ultimate Offering. If you were potentially using Ultimate Offering to chain a bunch of summons together, and then, you still had cards in hand, but couldn't summon anymore because you didn't have any more monsters, you wouldn't necessarily have to reveal off that. And that's like a sort of similar thing to Royal Tribute. Like, Ultimate Offering does not say, and then your opponent checks to make sure you can't summon a monster if this card just, finishes resolving without effect, right? And I think that's probably a more straightforward example as to why you wouldn't potentially grant a card like Royal Tribute or Mind Crush the ability to check your opponent's cards in hand after they've been activated. So, that if you were a bit confused as to, why these might not potentially allow your opponent to reveal, then Ultimate Offering should maybe be a better example for you. But so this has potentially come up in the past, but with the existence of things like Royal Tribute and Mind Crush, Mind Crush is on the way, but Royal Tribute is here, and Gravekeepers are somewhat popular in Yata format from the experimentation that we've been doing. So this can potentially come up a fair bit. So that's the way that my server is going to sort of rule these interactions, which I do think aligns with the GOAT format policy. If it doesn't, again, let me know. I'm not an expert in GOAT format rulings. I've just mainly seen the discussion on my Discord and also the sort of ruling notice here on goatformat.com, which, again, definitely read that if you haven't already. But before I end out this video talking about these sorts of hand verification things, I also want to mention a verification that we will not be doing as well, which is Nobleman of Crossout. Now, Nobleman of Crossout, there's generally the idea that, like, if you nobleman an opponent's monster and it's a flip monster, then, both players get to check each other's decks to make sure that the other player doesn't have additional copies of the flip monster after they banish the remaining ones from their deck. Now, in online play, this pretty much never happens, and for very good reason. While in actual paper play, there's very little chance of being able to memorize your opponent's entire deck from a quick glance through. In online play, you can just screenshot their deck and just know the entire concept of their deck, which is obviously not okay. So that's why people don't really do deck verification on things like Nobleman, and just cards that would potentially require deck verification in general. Generally not done because of things like just being able to screenshot the deck list, which, that's another difference between paper play and online play. And I do think it's kind of interesting the differences between those, like actually having bearing on these sorts of rulings. And I do think that, like, that's an interesting point of discussion. And that's honestly why I frame this as a discussion video, because I do think that there are lots of different ways you can sort of approach this issue, like on a personal level. Like, officially, we have to have a stance. And as I mentioned, the official stance for my Discord server in playing these games is going to be that, you don't have to reveal off of Royal Tribute or eventually Mind Crush when we do get that, because that seems to align with the GOAT format policies, and that's the format that we're closer to. I know that Mind Crush doesn't necessarily work like that in later formats, but when we reach those later formats, then we may change that. But for now, that's the sort of ruling that we're going with on my Discord server. And if you do want to play games in that Discord server, again, link is in the description down below. It's a great place to find games in these formats. And as a note, like, I say this for official tournament play, but I also said that, there can be debate over this sort of thing, in just discussing whether, to what extent the differences between paper and online play should be. And so I think if you're like arranging casual matches in these formats and you really hate this sort of no hand verification rule, you can ask your opponent, like, do you want to do it this way? Because there is potentially a sort of ambiguous ground there in terms of just like, if you're trying to emulate paper play as much as possible or not, and if you trust your opponent to like a certain degree to not screenshot your deck, then I mean, you could potentially play that like that. Although if you do trust your opponent to that extent, then you shouldn't necessarily need the verification in the first place. But I mean, again, I do think that this is potentially an area for debate, and I think it is interesting too, because like this debate was what caused GOAT format to release like this specific rulings page for Mind Crush, because it is a very interesting sort of thing to dive into and discuss and sort of draw the line between like how much you want to emulate the paper play in an online setting when online settings do have their own sorts of sort of things that go with them that paper play do not have. So what do you think about this? I'm very much looking forward to your thoughts. Like, I thought the discussion in the Discord server was very interesting, and it actually did change my mind, because I was initially, very much in favor of like, oh, just check the hands, because, it's not like that big of a deal. And it does emulate paper play like more than just not checking them. But I do think that after seeing the discussion and seeing, people mention that online has different features than, paper play, and that these cards don't necessarily specify revealing, it actually did change my mind. So I look forward to hearing your discussions down in the comments below as well. And yeah, this has been a very different sort of discussion video. I hope that you do all enjoy it. And rulings are not necessarily my expertise. Like, I have a decent acquaintance with them, because, you do occasionally have to know more obscure rulings when you're playing more obscure decks. But I'm definitely not a judge by any means. So, don't take this video and then show it to like a judge of a GOAT format tournament and be like, look, he said this. Like, definitely trust the judges over me, but this is how we're going to be ruling it on my server going forward, unless, other judges step in and say other things. But, that's part of why I wanted to make this video, to just have this out there in a public space so we could all discuss it together and get to the bottom of how exactly we're going to be ruling these in the future. But I hope that you all enjoyed this video as always, and I look forward to discussing this sort of thing with you down in the comments below. If you enjoy this sort of video, or just enjoy retro Yu-Gi-Oh formats in general, then definitely leave a like down below, and also subscribe to the channel. It really helps out a lot, and I'd really like to reach 1,000 by the end of the year. And we're at 810 or so subscribers now, so I think we can definitely make it. But I look forward to talking with you all down in the comments below, and until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.